As you explore the world of Azeroth, you're bound to discover many iconic locations both above ground and deep below it. From major cities to small grottos and ruins teeming with secrets, the diversity and detail of the landscapes is impressive. What was especially novel for its time is how Vanilla WoW provided a near seamless gameplay experience with hardly any loading screens between indoor and outdoor locations, an element that contributes to the immersion of Azeroth even today. Deep within the mountains of northern Kalimdor, Timbermaw Hold is one of the best examples of this cohesion. A vast tunnel system connecting 3 zones that's guarded by the last uncorrupted tribe of furbolg. Despite being first introduced in Warcraft 3, there's a surprising amount of lore and forgotten details to discover in this region, including unfinished content that never made it into the game, and today, I want to talk about it. This video serves as a companion to my recent episodes on Mount Hyjal and Azshara, and if you're interested in learning more, you can check out the links in the description. As always, thank you for the fun comments and support, and with all that being said, let's get right into it. Members of both factions will likely encounter the Timbermaw furbolg as they reach their upper level 40s and early 50s, when much of the high level content in Kalimdor starts to become relevant. For one reason or another, you'll eventually be sent off to Winterspring or Moonglade, high altitude zones with only one entrance, through Timbermaw Hold. In northern Felwood, the signature Bearhead entrance marks the start of Timbermaw territory, but it also presents something of an obstacle to unaware travelers. The Timbermaw, while not corrupted by demonic forces like so many of their once fellow tribes, are very mistrustful of outsiders, and are initially hostile to adventurers who try to pass through the tunnel system to their destination. While this is an interesting game design choice that nearly forces players to engage with the game's reputation system, it's tragic when you consider the furbolg of Mount Hyjal were fervent allies of the Night Elves just a few years earlier. To prove yourself as a newfound ally, you can talk to the 2 more tolerant furbolg at the northern and southern ends of Felwood, who offer quests to slowly but surely raise your reputation with the Hold by collecting trophies from the tribe's enemies. Once you've progressed from hostile to unfriendly, you can step inside the tunnel system unscathed, but you might want to go further and get your reputation up to neutral so you can take advantage of all the faction's benefits. In the central area of the Hold, which also serves as the junction for the tunnels, you can find a few furbolg vendors and quest givers who offer a couple other ways to improve your reputation. The main one, in typical classic WoW fashion, is a donation of runecloth, and a mooncloth if you're a highly specialized tailor. The only other repeatable method is visiting Salfa at the Winterspring tunnel entrance, who offers a similar quest to those in Felwood. Most players are totally unaware of this, but if you progress all the way to Exalted, Gorn One-Eye offers an exclusive bonus quest that resolves the threat of the Winterfall storyline, involving summoning and defeating the fell presence responsible for the neighboring tribe's corruption. The reward from this quest, a trinket that summons a Timbermaw spirit to assist you in battle, is 1, really neat on its own, and 2, a callback to the reward from a Warcraft 3 mission in which Tyrande Whisperwind helped some furbolg in the tunnels underneath Mount Hyjal. This final quest is not directly linked to the Dawn of a Snowden storyline in Winterspring, but it does serve as a disconnected follow-up of sorts, only revealed to those who have put in the time and effort to befriend the tribe. I'd love to make a video going over the entire furbolg storyline all across the Night Elven lands, but for now, let's return to the more structural side of things. Here's a look at Timbermaw Hold. As I mentioned, there are 3 tunnels linking Felwood, Moonglade, and Winterspring, and making the latter 2 accessible on foot. Each one has a Bearhead entryway, and something else I wanted to mention is how this model is nearly a polygon for polygon copy of the actual bear creature model in the game. They're not identical, but the structure seems to me like the designers used the in-game bear as a reference or maybe a starting point for this larger carving, which is pretty cool. It should also be noted that while this area is the crossroads for a trio of zones, the entire model is linked to Felwood. This is probably just for database purposes, but also makes sense lore-wise. Moonglade is the sacred land of the druids, and Winterspring already has a dominant tribe of furbolg adapted to the wintry environment. But Felwood, the ancient forested slopes now blackened with demon fire, is likely the historical main domain of the Timbermaw. along with of course the tunnel system itself, and maybe Mount Hyjal. Here's the overhead view again. Do you notice anything out of the ordinary? Even from the player's perspective, you're bound to notice the fourth tunnel branching off to the southwest, but it's blocked off by a sealed door. Using a model viewer, or maybe a lucky teleport if you're a mage, you can see a small extension of what could lead to a whole other part of the network, but it ends at the void before we find anything else. The question on everyone's mind for 20 years now, where was this tunnel supposed to lead? Let's investigate 3 clues that actually exist in the game world of Classic WoW. The first is the sealed, out-of-place human gateway in northern Ajara, which is also labeled as a part of Timbermaw Hold. As I talked about in my previous episode, this was assumed to be the placeholder for an alternate entrance to Timbermaw Hold, or at the very least a separate set of tunnels that are involved with Mount Hyjal and the Timbermaw tribe. There's also Darkshore's infamous Road to Nowhere, which I talked about in a video from a while back. It's likely the remnants of a road to the isolated Shatterspear village in the Darkshore Mountains, but it's another point of interest close enough to the hold that I thought I'd mention it. Last is Mount Hyjal itself, closed off to players from day one, but on the western side there is a volcanic cave in a valley that's a copy of Onyxia's lair, and the blocked off tunnel seems to be pointing in that direction. These are 3 potential options that could tie back to the tunnels we have so far, with the Ajara Gate being the most meaningful lore-wise. But I'd also like to introduce a possibility that is only present in the lore and is absent from Classic WoW, the huge barrow deeps below Mount Hyjal. These ancient caves were first introduced in Warcraft 3, when our heroes navigated through them to wake the slumbering elven druids and free Illidan Stormrage from his prison of 10,000 years. They're supposed to extend underneath a good portion of Mount Hyjal, perhaps linking the elven barrow dens in Winterspring and elsewhere up near the summit where the climactic final battle took place, and maybe the unfinished extremities of Timbermaw Hold as well. This is, in my opinion, the most likely candidate for where the blocked off tunnel would have led, at least in some type of way. Apart from the RTS level, we only have a few concept images of what the barrow deeps could have looked like. And while Mount Hyjal did get its own regular barrow den added in Cataclysm, it's not as expansive as the sprawling underground ecosystem depicted before. Which brings me to the crux of this video. If we were to envision a future for this concept, or maybe an alternate past, how could this be done? How could we expand on these unfinished pieces, and maybe loop in the barrow deeps as well? After accounting for both the distance and change in elevation, not to mention the logistics of an entire underground zone sitting below Hyjal, I believe it would be very difficult for the unfinished passages to be developed using a traditional perspective. They're just too low, too high, or too expansive, and the tunnels we do have are already some of the longest interior spaces rendered on the open world map. So what else is there to consider? Well, notice how I said spaces on the open world map. There is one example that we can turn to that helps facilitate distant connections between zones and render underground space in a different way, and some of you are probably already thinking about it: the Deep Run Tram. This is the tunnel that lets players travel between Stormwind and Ironforge with ease, but there's a catch. The tram is on its own map, and there are loading screen portals that take you from the outdoor world into and out of the isolated tram world during your travel. While there is a tiny loss in immersion because of this still works really well for 2 related reasons. 1, it allows for distant travel between places that would otherwise be difficult to navigate due to underground obstacles, like Blackrock Mountain for instance, and 2, this allows for a bit of compression where scale is concerned. My fellow WoW content creator 720zone has a great video analyzing the Deep Run Tram, and while it seems like it's this lengthy underground ride linking the 2 cities, if you put the tram on the actual map, you'd barely make it out of Dun Morogh. Maybe something like this could be done to implement our fabled subterranean cavern, a place perfectly fitting for Northern Kalimdor and all its rich history, but also completely new in its direction and style. Imagine the Barrow Deeps on its own separate map, with entry portals from the surface world and the various caves. You can see the red dashed lines representing the compressed space that could be cut to keep the size of the zone manageable, just like the Deep Run Tram but with a few more pieces. We might see Illidan's prison and the Wardens, expanded druid barrows, strange magical creatures, lost or corrupted furbolg, there are a ton of directions the story could go, and I'd love to hear your ideas down in the comments. From a modeling standpoint, I think using a combination of both WMO tunnel models and the terrain editor could be effective, kind of like the Deadmines approach to being underground, but with a few more primal and deep aspects like the landscapes outside Ajul Narub and the dim grottos of Maradon or Blackfathom Deeps. On a final note for today, I'd like to mention a concept for the Timbermaw tunnels that went in a very different, but still very compelling direction, and that is of course Turtle WoW. To my limited outsider knowledge, the Barrow Deeps angle was never fully addressed, but TWoW did expand on the furbolg aspect by keeping the two halves of Timbermaw territory separate, adding a corrupted furbolg raid on the unfinished Ajara side, and using the space to add an extra tunnel to one of their new coastal zones. A great solution to the logistics problem, and regardless of what Blizzard decides to do or not do in the future, I think these concepts are just interesting to talk about. Scrapped content, even the barest inkling of it, blurs the line between an unfinished past and a potential future for parts of the game, another realm that exists beneath our feet and has played a role in the history of Kalimdor for thousands of years. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you learned something new today, and I had a lot of fun sorting through ideas and making the maps for this episode. A special thank you to my channel members who provide bonus support for these videos, and until next time, may the Force be with you.